My son sent me a message. Change of plans, Mom. You don't need to prepare anymore. You won't be joining us on the cruise. This trip is just for the family. The next day, I canceled all the payments, sold the house, and disappeared. When they came back, I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from so I'll know just how far the Miami rain has reached. The morning at the Miami port was blindingly bright. Sunlight bounced off the water while the sea breeze whipped the cruise ship banners into wild ripples. I pulled my suitcase, its wheels grinding against the polished brick walkway. In my canvas bag were my ticket, a small pillbox, 3 carefully wrapped new dresses, a bottle of water, and my worn leather notebook. I had saved all year to treat myself to this cruise, a real family vacation, as Ryan once put it. I stood in line, my heart beating fast with anticipation. All around me, people were laughing, calling out to one another, waving at the staff checking tickets. I pictured myself in a photo on the ship's deck with the whole family, 3 generations side by side, sunlight spilling over our shoulders. For the first time in a long time, hope flickered in my chest. My phone buzzed softly. A message appeared on the screen. Mom, you don't need to prepare anymore. Just a small change. This trip is for family only. I stared at the short line of text, trying to find something hidden behind it. A joke, a typo, a misunderstanding. But no, the next line was clear, cold, and sharp as a letter opener. I looked up. On the upper deck, Ryan stood beside Paige, holding Lily in his arms. Next to them, Noah waved a little paper flag, laughing loudly. They leaned over the railing, taking selfies, their laughter caught by the wind. None of them saw me. Or maybe they did, and just pretended not to. A feeling slid through my stomach, like missing a step on a staircase. Then everything went still. Not a searing pain, but a thin layer of ice spreading everywhere. Cold, quiet, and clear. I slipped my phone into my bag, pulled my suitcase out of the line, and turned away. I passed a coffee stand where a family was waiting. The father adjusted his child's cap, while the mother wiped sweat from the little one's forehead. They laughed as they took a photo. I suddenly felt like someone on the other side of a glass panel, not hated, just invisible. On the road out of the port, the loudspeakers kept announcing the departure time. I paused for a moment, looking at the massive white ship, still and gleaming like a dream whose door had just closed. I didn't cry. There was nothing to cry about. The rideshare arrived a few minutes later. The driver, a middle-aged Cuban man, struck up a friendly conversation. "Where to, ma'am?" "Fort Lauderdale." "You got a cruise ticket?" "I see the luggage." I only smiled. "I'm not going anymore." The car rolled off. The city slid by outside the window in slow motion. Deep blue water, rows of palms bending in the wind, glass towers reflecting the sky. I caught my reflection in the window, a face lined with small cracks, not ugly, just showing the years. I thought about Ryan, my son, once the little boy who clutched my hand crossing the street, who used to say, "Mom, you're my home." Now he had another home, another family of his own. I had helped him make the down payment on the house in Austin, watched the kids whenever they had work trips, brought soup when Paige was pregnant. Each time I told myself, don't overthink it, this is how a mother helps her child. But slowly, I realized helping had turned into a silent obligation. I remembered other moments Thanksgiving last year, when they didn't invite me, saying, "This year we want to try a new restaurant on our own." Lily's birthday, which I only learned about from a photo online. A parent-teacher conference where Ryan texted, "You don't need to come, Mom, we've got it." Piece by piece, it all added up, and now this morning's message was simply the final nail. The car sped down I-95, billboards flickering outside, traffic flowing the other way. I wondered, if I'm no longer in their family trip, where exactly do I stand in that picture? An image flashed in my mind. The filing cabinet in the corner of my living room, where I'd stored all the old papers, the Austin house contract, bank receipts, the nearly paid-off mortgage papers. I'd never touched them again, thinking, family matters don't need to be so cut and dried. But maybe it was time to open it. The car turned onto my street, late morning light stretching across the sidewalk. I opened the door to my apartment, leaving the lights off, letting the natural light pour in. The room was quiet, the faint scent of dried orange still lingering from the incense I'd forgotten to put out. I rolled my suitcase inside and stopped in front of the mirror. A silver-haired woman looked back at me, her figure no longer soft, but her eyes brighter than ever. I took out my notebook and wrote a single short line, the letters slanting but firm. Take back the right to decide your life. I closed the notebook and set it on the table. When I lifted my head, my gaze landed on the metal filing cabinet in the corner. Its silver door caught a glint of light. I walked toward it, my hand resting on the cold handle. I didn't know what I'd find inside, but I felt it clearly. When I opened that door, it wouldn't just be papers I'd be unfolding, it would be my whole life, after years of being folded away. I sat close to the metal filing cabinet, resting my hand on the handle, cold. The chill ran straight up my spine, a reminder. Steady, slow, clear. The top drawer clicked open, releasing the faint scent of old paper. I pulled out a thick folder, the metal clip squeaking slightly. On the cover, the address of the house in Round Rock, the northern suburb of Austin, where I once took a photo of Ryan holding Noah on the front porch. Inside were the notarized sale contract, the interest summary, and the mortgage payment schedule, every box neatly checked off. I stopped at the last receipt, 2 months ago, a transfer from my account, the note reading, final payment. I underlined it with a blue pen and exhaled a short breath. I laid out the documents in columns. Ownership, mortgage, insurance, property tax. Every page bore my name. There was no appendix mentioning gift transfer, no signed letter promising to change the title, no co-ownership agreement. The edges of truth came into focus. Legally, this house was still mine. The lower drawer held my expense ledger. I turned each page. Kitchen remodel, Quartz Island, Noah's summer math camp, roof repair, Ryan's car payments, first 6 months. Every entry had a date, an amount, a photo of the receipt stapled beside it, not to keep count, but to remember what I'd done. I closed the ledger, my hands warmer now, my heart steadier. I found Mark Levin's business card, the attorney in Austin, who handled the original paperwork, and dialed his number. He picked up quickly. Hello, Ellen. It's been a long time since I've heard your voice. Hi, Mark. I need you to confirm something. The Round Rock house is still under my name, and I have full rights to manage it. I'm opening your file now? Yes, owner of record, Ellen Harper. No addendum for transfer of ownership. The mortgage is fully paid off. Legally, you have full authority to sell, lease, or renovate. If you'd like a quick sale, we'll need a buyer with ready funds. I'll handle the paperwork and certification. I want everything above board, no loose ends. Understood. And one note. Prepare an inventory of the fixtures, lighting, kitchen appliances, drapes separate from Ryan and Paige's personal items. You should arrange temporary storage for their belongings to avoid disputes. I have a transfer of possession form. I'll send it right away. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Thank you, Mark. Ellen, are you doing all right? I'm fine. I just need to get this done before emotions get in the way. I hung up and opened my email. I composed a message to Teresa Miller, an old friend and veteran real estate agent in the Austin area. I snapped photos of the key documents, attached them, and typed briefly. I'd like to sell quickly, fair price, clear terms, prefer cash buyer. I'm currently in Florida. Can sign and notarize electronically through my bank. I paused for a moment, deleted a long, emotional sentence, and left only the facts. In less than 10 minutes, Teresa called back. Her voice was firm, a little husky from talking on the phone all day. Ellen, I got everything. There's a young doctor couple looking for a home near the Children's Hospital and the ER. They're ready to move fast if the title's clean. Do you have recent photos? Not yet. Have your photo team go by. I'll send the fixture list as soon as Mark's form arrives. Good. I'll post it internally first. Keep your name confidential. If all goes smoothly, the photographers can shoot this afternoon, and the buyers can tour tomorrow. You'll need to schedule a moving company to separate and store items. Send me a list of reputable movers and storage facilities prepaid for 3 months. I'll text them right away. Ellen, are you sure about this? I'm sure. I hung up and opened a new note titled, To-Do List. I divided it into columns: legal, real estate, moving and storage, banking. Under legal, wait for Mark's possession, transfer form, verify it at the local bank, arrange power of attorney if needed. Under real estate, photos, light staging, open house per schedule, keep the keys in a lockbox. Under moving and storage, select company, require before and after photos of each room, label each box by room, create an inventory list, deliver to storage, pay 3 months in advance. Under banking, check transfer limits, open an escrow, receiving account. I glanced at the clock. The ship had probably left port by now. The thought drifted by, then vanished. No bitterness, just a timestamp. I poured another cup of coffee, opened Mark's email. The sample transfer form, a checklist with photo attachments. I printed it, clipped it neatly. The pen glided smoothly across the paper. My handwriting was even steady. The phone buzzed again, a message from Teresa with contact info for 3 moving companies and 2 storage facilities in Round Rock, each with camera systems and individual access codes. I called the first company. The agent's tone was brisk and professional. "We have openings tomorrow and the following day. What service package would you like?" "Full pack pre- and post-move photos, inventory list, delivery to storage. I'll send the fixture list. Built-ins are not to be removed. My son's and daughter-in-law's belongings packed separately by room." "Understood. Will we have access to the property?" "My realtor will provide entry. I'll send the contract and deposit today." I ended the call and added one more item. Storage prepay 3 months. Everything was falling into place like pieces of Lego, not pretty, but solid. I heard my own voice murmur quietly, fast, precise, complete. It was late afternoon in Round Rock. Sunlight filtered through the oak leaves, scattering dappled patches across the freshly cut grass, still carrying the scent of green. A few grocery flyers stuck out of the mailbox. I stood at the front door of Ryan's house, the key with the red plastic tag resting in my palm. I took a deep breath and slid it into the lock. The key turned with a clean click like a snap of fingers waking the house. I pushed the door open. It creaked softly. The neighbor next door, watering her flowers, paused and called out in a clear voice. "They've gone on the cruise, haven't they?" "Yes, I'm just stopping by to take care of a few of their plants." "That's good. It's been hot these days." She smiled, turned back to her hose. I nodded and closed the door behind me. The air inside was cool and clean, with a faint trace of scented candles. The living room was bright, the wall of photos arranged in a neat grid. I walked closer. The newer frames were filled with pictures of Ryan, Paige, and the 2 kids' holidays, picnics, Halloween costumes. The photos with me ended 2 years ago. I touched the edge of one frame lightly. My fingertip felt cold. A dark wood bookshelf stood against the wall. The books I'd once given them, art history, gardening techniques. A few novels were tucked on the lower shelf, the cabinet door left slightly ajar. The shelves above held sets of matching leather-bound books, decorative more than read. I nudged the door open a little wider, then let it fall back. In the kitchen, the white refrigerator was covered with notes. Weekly meal plans, Noah's and Lily's activity schedules, baseball practice, music lessons. Not a single line mentioned my name. Beside it hung a small magnetic board where Paige had written, "Things to buy," in careful script. I looked at those letters the way one looks at watercolor spreading on paper, smooth, flawless, but cold. Ryan's office was at the end of the hallway. The door wasn't locked. His desk was tidy, the computer screen asleep, the chair perfectly aligned. I opened the second drawer. A white envelope lay in the center, its corner printed with the letterhead of a local law firm. I sat down and ran a finger under the flap. Inside was a draft of a property transfer agreement. The date read 3 months ago. My name appeared as the grantor, the signature line blank. All the other boxes were filled in as if only one signature stood between plan and completion. I read each line carefully, missing no commas or dots. My heart didn't pound, it just tightened, small and precise. I folded the paper along its old crease, slipped it back into the envelope, and placed it in my handbag. Not as a weapon, only as a reminder. The truth had always been here. By afternoon, the photography team arrived. A young woman set up a tripod, a man adjusted the lens, and Teresa walked ahead, drawing the curtains aside, shifting the floor lamp a little to add depth to the shot. "The kitchen looks great. Keep the minimalist setup, it'll look more spacious in photos." "Got it. Remember to capture the backyard, the oak tree's a real selling point." "Understood." While they worked, I sat at the dining table, writing the list of attached fixtures. My handwriting was steady. The blue ink flowed evenly. I heard the quick clicks of the camera, Teresa's quiet reminders, the soft shuffle of shoes across the floor. Every sound neat, in its place. The next day, the young doctor couple arrived right on time. The husband was about 35, tall, reserved. His wife about the same age, observant eyes. They walked slowly through each room, running their hands along the stone countertop, asking about the age of the roof, the year the air conditioner was replaced, whether the lawn sprinkler system was automatic. Teresa answered clearly, occasionally asking follow-up questions to confirm their needs. How long would you like your commute to the hospital to be? Schools nearby have great ratings. The neighborhood's quiet, lots of trees. They exchanged glances and nodded slightly. No polite compliments, just the kind of questions that mattered. I stood a few steps back, my hand resting on a chair. They lingered at the backyard window for a long moment. That old oak is beautiful, the wife said. In the fall, its leaves turn all gold, I replied. My voice sounded like someone else's calm, not sad. By early evening, they came back a second time. After reviewing the printed home file Teresa had prepared, the husband said, "We'd like to offer slightly above the listing price. We can place an earnest deposit today. We hope to close within 7 days, assuming the escrow clears." Teresa looked at me. "You should have your attorney review the terms." I called Mark. He listened as I read the main clauses aloud, asked a few technical questions, then said simply, "The terms are solid. The buyers have verified funds and proper escrow. You can sign the draft. I'll handle the rest." I set the phone down and looked at the couple before me. They waited, their expressions patient, unpressing. "All right," I said. "Let's do the deposit today." The papers moved across the table like chess pieces sliding into place. Teresa handed me a pen. I signed. The husband signed, then the wife. The scratch of pens against thick paper was distinct in the quiet room. Finally, Teresa gathered the documents and nodded. "Tomorrow, the movers will come as scheduled. I'll set up a lockbox for the keys so everyone can access the property when needed. Send me the code tonight," I said. After the clients left, the house fell silent again. I went around, turning off lights, checking the stove, locking the back door. At the front threshold, I bent down, lifted the inner edge of the doormat, and slipped the spare key underneath so the photography crew could enter early in the morning. The mat lay flat again. Stepping outside, the evening breeze carried the warm scent of soil. I locked the door. The metal clicked together clean, just as when I'd arrived. The neighbor was rolling up her hose, looked over. "Are their plants doing okay?" "I watered them," I said, smiling faintly. In the car heading back to Austin, I sat in the back seat, my hand resting on my bag. The envelope with the unsigned draft lay quietly inside. I didn't take it out, just placed my fingertips on its edge, feeling its weight. The road was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon, store signs gliding by, street lights just beginning to glow. I closed my eyes for a moment. The line had been drawn. What remained now was to follow it straight ahead, no looking back, no step astray. The next day, I arrived at the corner branch of the bank. The clerk slid over a glass pen guard and explained the verification procedure. I signed the ink sinking cleanly into the thick paper. The manager checked my ID, stamped the time, and forwarded the document packet to the law office. Just as I stepped into the parking lot, Mark called, "The buyers have transferred the earnest deposit into the escrow account. Funds confirmed." The contract is now in effect. I rested my hand on the car door, let my eyes close for 2 beats like setting a brick exactly where it belongs. That afternoon, the moving company's truck rolled into the neighborhood driveway. 3 men wearing gloves carried rolls of tape, bubble wrap, and a camera. They moved from the living room to the kitchen, then upstairs to the bedrooms, photographing every corner before packing. Each box was labeled by room: Noah, Lego shelf; Lily, picture books; master bedroom, hanging clothes. I stood by the doorway, recording the box numbers while keeping a polite distance. No item was tossed carelessly. They worked quietly, efficiently, like a surgical team that knew the routine by heart. When the truck pulled away, I followed to the storage facility a few miles away. The attendant opened the gate, scanned the code, handed me the receipt, the 3-month storage insurance, and the individual lock codes for each unit. I signed and paid at the counter. On the invoice, in small printed letters, "Prepaid 3 months payment received." I filed the receipt neatly into the gray binder. Later that afternoon, standing on the porch, Teresa called me inside for a final walkthrough. Together we checked every switch, shut off the laundry valve, tested the smoke alarm on the ceiling, opened and relocked the back gate. On the wall, the last light of the day slid away quickly. "Hand over the keys to the buyers one day before their family arrives," Teresa reminded me. I nodded. Mark had already sent a confirmation letter with the timeline, along with the list of signatures required at the escrow office. I sat down at the dining table, the wooden surface bare, the folded tablecloth neatly set aside. A blank sheet of paper lay in front of me. I began writing a letter by hand to Ryan and Paige. The first stroke came out dark, the rest even. I stated clearly, the house had been sold, based on the contract and the fully settled mortgage. Their personal belongings had been moved to storage, with a detailed list of box numbers. They could contact attorney Mark Levin at any time to collect the keys and the documents. The list of boxes and storage information were included in the attached binder. I paused before the part about my feelings. I kept it short, a few plain sentences, that I had been left out of important occasions many times, that the message at the Miami port, family only, had only confirmed what I'd long known, that I would be leaving Texas for a while to take painting classes and find space for healing. No reproach, no drama. I read it back. The sentences stood upright, cool enough not to sound like complaint, warm enough not to turn into an ultimatum. I opened the gray binder, a copy of the sale contract, the storage receipts, the box inventory, Mark's business card, and the printed email confirming the handover date. I placed the handwritten letter on top. Using a small clip, I attached the spare garage gate key beside it. Everything fit, tidy, and complete. In the kitchen, by the window, there was still a small potted plant. I lifted it onto the counter, brushed the dust off its leaves. I'd promised the neighbor I would take a few plants to care for, but as I looked at it there, I knew that caretaking had reached its end. I set it on the counter, a little away from the space where the fruit bowl used to sit. The green stood still in the afternoon light, needing no more water. It was time to leave. I stood at the doorway, letting the air move against my face, looking back at the house one last time. No regret. The feeling was like loosening a tight jacket after years of wear, shoulders released, back moving freely again. I pulled the door closed. The latch clicked softly into the frame. The realtor's lockbox hung on the porch wall. I slipped the keys inside, heard the dry drop, shut the lid, pressed the lock. My phone took a photo, which I sent to Teresa and Mark with a short message. Locked, handoff per confirmation letter. On the drive back to my apartment, the Austin sky shifted from gold to deep blue. I opened my laptop, went to the booking site, and selected a flight to Santa Fe 4 days later. The watercolor class registration page was already open from before. I filled in the rest: schedule, course name, tuition. The confirm button glowed green. I clicked it. Done, no need to revisit. My phone buzzed Ryan's name on the screen. The light glowed in the quiet kitchen. I let the call pass. Voicemail picked it up automatically. Another call came, then silence. I placed the phone face down on the table, standing still with my hand on the chair. Tomorrow, there would be words. This time, I wouldn't rush to put out fires. I was ready to listen, to speak, and not to step back. At the edge of the table, the printed plane ticket lay flat ink still fresh, a single, necessary line leading me out of the old maze. Early morning. The doorbell rang in quick, urgent bursts like someone pounding straight against my chest. I opened the door. Ryan stood on the doormat, eyes sunken, t-shirt wrinkled, his hands clenching and unclenching. He walked in without a word of greeting, the damp chill of the night air still clinging to his hair. A storm had entered my small living room unannounced. He strode to the center of the room. "You sold the house." It wasn't a question. I nodded slightly. "You sold our house. We just got back. Paige called the storage facility, and the kids are asking why all their toys are gone. Did you even think about them?" His voice rose, then broke lower, his hands gesturing, pacing around the table like a trapped animal. I poured 2 glasses of water and slid one toward him. "Drink first, then talk." "I'm not thirsty. I need you to explain." I sat down by the window, choosing the seat against the light so I wouldn't be pulled into his expression. "The house is in my name. All transactions are legal. Your and Paige's personal items have been boxed, photographed before and after, and moved to a prepaid storage unit for 3 months. The box list is in the folder. Contact information for the storage facility and the attorney are there as well." "Legal this, paperwork that, escrow," he sneered. "But what about family? How cold do you have to be to do something like this? I looked at the glass of water. Its surface was flat, throwing a thin streak of light onto the ceiling. What does family mean in that message from Miami, Ryan? Family only. So what was I? A tool? A backup plan? A babysitter? That wasn't... He took half a step back. Why did my name disappear from the photo wall? Why wasn't I on the guest list for Thanksgiving? Why did I find out about Lily's birthday from a picture online? Why did you text me no need for the parent-teacher meeting? And why is it only when you needed someone to watch Noah, fix the kitchen, or cover your car payments that you called me? He froze, then gripped the back of a chair, searching for words. It's not what you think. We needed privacy. We were trying to build our own rhythm as a couple. Sometimes it just wasn't convenient. Is not convenient enough reason to erase someone from the family? I'm sorry, he breathed hard. Can't we just go back to how things were? I know that message upset you, but selling the house, that's too much. The word back slipped past my ear like a bent pin. What exactly is how things were? The setup where I'm just a function? Where I appear when needed and fade when not? No. Then what do you want? I felt as calm as when I draw the first line of a painting. I'm leaving Texas for a while. I've registered for a watercolor class in Santa Fe and booked a place to stay. I'll contact Noah and Lily on a regular schedule. One, I'll propose myself. And us? You take care of your own family. If you want to repair things, start by seeing me as an independent person. He sat down at the table, elbows on the edge, head bowed. I didn't think you'd actually go this far. I didn't think I'd stand alone on a pier and read that message either, but things needed to be made clear. He lifted his head, eyes red. Then, do you still? He swallowed. If we ever need help. I don't do last-minute babysitting. I don't front emergency money. Any help, if it happens, will be discussed ahead of time, spoken respectfully, under agreement. You and Paige are capable of that. I'll try, he said quietly, hands tightening. And the house? The house is settled. It won't be undone. Silence fell. Outside, the sun was rising, tree shadows leaning across the wall. I heard the garbage truck at the end of the street, the soft patter of sparrows dropping like scattered seeds. So what am I supposed to do now? His voice was smaller, stripped of anger. Start by telling Paige the truth. Don't aim your anger at someone who isn't here. Look at how you talk to me. Keep Noah and Lily's call schedule with me on time. And I paused, choosing words as carefully as colors. When you feel tempted to send a short text to tidy things up, make a phone call instead. Real faces deserve space in your life. He nodded slowly. His hands opened on his lap, as if remembering how to hold something fragile. I'll reach out later. All right. He stood. I followed him to the door. No hug, no slammed exit. Just my hand brushing the latch, the click of the lock against the wooden frame, a quiet period at the end of a sentence. He turned for half a second, as if to speak, then didn't, and stepped down the porch. The apartment went still again. I sat back in the chair and opened my laptop. The confirmation email for the class sat at the top of the inbox, the cursor blinking like the heartbeat of someone who had finally arrived. I clicked it open. Registration successful. Classes begin next week. I switched tabs to the booking page and selected a small studio near Canyon Road. The confirm button glowed, and I pressed it. I rolled my suitcase to the center of the room and began to pack. A light sweater, jeans, walking shoes, my leather notebook, pencils, masking tape, a new watercolor set. I placed the paint box on top. Its lid caught the morning light, cutting through the window a clean gleam, sharp as a freshly honed blade. My shoulders dropped. My breathing steadied. My phone lit up. A voicemail from Ryan. I didn't play it. I stood by the window, watching the sunlight crawl across the city, listening to the hum of morning powering on. A different journey had begun, not an escape, but a path marked by class schedules, flight tickets, and a paint box sitting exactly where it should. I left the phone untouched. In my mind, one sentence formed clear as a horizon after rain. No retreat, no panic, no bitterness, just forward and right on. The afternoon in Santa Fe was as dry as fresh paper. The wind carried the scent of pine across the adobe rooftops, and the sky was so blue it felt as if you could break it into pieces. I hauled my suitcase up the steps to the monthly rental. The window opened onto Canyon Road, where gallery signs peeked through the aspens. On the table waited a set of brushes, a stack of fine-grained paper, and the coarse confirmation sheet pinned down by a smooth, round stone. I set my keys down, opened the window wider, and let the dry air fill my lungs completely. The next morning, I tried out this new rhythm of life. I walked past low adobe houses, their earthen walls mottled like a background already primed for painting. A small cafe opened early. The barista asked what I'd like, and I ordered a black coffee, chose a table by the door, pulled out my notebook, and wrote 3 short lines of plan. Morning, walk, take notes. Afternoon, studio, evening, plaza. Outside, people moved at an unhurried pace. The sound of shoes on the pavement, the soft clink of cups against saucers, every noise seemed pared down, its edges sanded smooth. In the afternoon, I went to the studio, a large room with tall windows, the smell of damp paper and freshly mixed watercolor in the air. The instructor stood at the front, an older man with silver hair and a checkered shirt. He dipped his brush, held his hand steady over the paper. Control over the brush stroke, he said, is the first mastery in painting. A faint line of blue spread across the page, its edge blurring like breath. He added a drop of water, the border softened, and a tiny sky appeared in that small space. I taped the paper edges and began sketching the distant hills. The first time, I tried to fix the uneven wash and ended up with a muddy gray patch. I swirled the brush hard in the water jar and sighed. The instructor passed behind me and said quietly, "Guide your hands until they find the point of contact." I set the brush down and waited. The second time, I diluted the paint more, drew one long stroke, then lifted the brush and let the water move on its own. The blue touched the yellow, forming a thin olive band. Suddenly the sky had depth. I looked up and caught his approving nod. No praise, just a nod enough. There were 7 other students in the class, most around my age. They talked about gallery hours, the end-of-term exhibit, and where to buy cheaper paper. Marjorie, a woman with cropped white hair, handed me a slip of paper with an address. "There's a little gallery at the end of the street," she said. "They let students hang 2 paintings at the end of the term, if you'd like." I took the paper and nodded. "Thank you," she smiled. "Everyone here hangs at least 1 piece, their first time." Right on schedule that evening, I called Noah and Lily on video. Their faces lit up the screen, both of them talking at once, showing me their schoolwork, a paper with gold stars pressed right up to the camera. I turned my phone toward the watercolor sky I'd just painted and said, "Grandma's learning how to paint clouds." Noah tilted his head. "Why are the cloud edges blurry?" I lifted my brush to show him. "Because water meets water, it spreads by itself, like raindrops on a window," Lily asked. "Will you send me a card?" "I will," I promised. "This weekend." No mention of the grown-ups, no talk of the house, just the sky, the clouds, and a gold star on paper. The next day, I made a schedule with a marker and taped it beside the window. Morning, dry brush practice tree lines, chair shadows. Afternoon, wet on wet testing shades of blue. Evening, reflections after each lesson. I bought another thin notebook, cut out swatches from color tests, glued them in, wrote down the date, time, water ratio, even the day's temperature. Those small numbers kept me grounded, kept me from drifting away. I turned off the main light, leaving only the desk lamp shining on the open page. I wrote a single line, "Guide the path, don't force it." Then another, "Learning how to wait." Outside, someone locked the last gallery door for the night. The click of the lock echoed down the alley, dry and clear. I closed the notebook. There was nothing left to chase. Water would find its own way. I stood there, took a long breath, and realized my body had changed rhythm without my noticing. Everything seemed to have found a peaceful ending, but life, it seemed, had no intention of giving me one so easily. That morning, I opened the mailbox before the sun had fully risen over the line of adobe rooftops. Mark's email sat at the top, the subject concise, "Quick note on potential dispute." I took a breath and opened it. He summarized briefly. Ryan's side had consulted a law firm about petitioning the court to review the transaction, arguing a verbal commitment had been made in the past. Mark's next line was dry as a form letter. Based on the existing records, there was no legal ground. Still, he advised me to keep every receipt, contract copy, pre- and post-move photos of each room, and the signed storage inventory. At the end, he proposed a short video call late in the morning for updates. I pulled the clear plastic folder from my desk drawer and spread the documents across the bed, like laying out a meal that required every dish to be present: notarized contract copy, escrow confirmation, storage payment receipts, box inventory labeled by room, and a printed set of before and after photos with timestamps. I clipped each bundle neatly, labeling them with a marker. My hands didn't shake. Only once at the photo of the living room before the movers came, I paused half a second. My reflection was faintly visible in the mirror on the wall, a blurred silhouette. I placed the photo in the center of the folder and closed it, hearing the soft click of plastic sealing shut. The video call with Mark came right on time. The screen split in two. On his side, a bookshelf and a sunlit window. He asked me 3 questions. I answered each, holding the folder up to the camera so he could see the labels. "Good," he said. "Legally, they have no standing whatsoever. But I want you prepared, there may be some unpleasant calls. I'm ready. If you get any threatening or emotional messages, forward them to me immediately. Don't respond on your own." I know. When the call ended, the room went still again. I sat for a while, listening to the wind rustle through the trees outside the window. Being in the right, legally, doesn't mean the ache goes away. I thought of Ryan of the nights when he was little, sitting at the edge of the bed, asking, "Mom, you're not going anywhere, right?" I could almost see a taut line stretched between what's right and what hurts, and I had no intention of touching it again. I turned off my phone and picked up my brush. Today's exercise was a small waterfall white foam breaking against dark rocks. I dipped into a cool gray, shaped the rocks with short, firm strokes. For the water, I left the paper wet, drew a pale blue wash, dropped in a few clean drops to let them bloom, then used the dry edge of the brush to flick small marks foam. I focused so deeply I forgot the bitterness of cold coffee beside me. Each ripple flowed exactly into its hollow, finding its own path. The stage in my mind went silent. Only the soundless water fell steady, clear, untouched by verbal agreements or paperwork. By late afternoon, as the paint was drying, the inbox lit up again. Sender, Paige. First line, "I know it's too late for a lot of things." I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. She wrote that they had seen a therapist twice. They'd been asked to list every instance they had relied on me, every time they had excluded me for the sake of privacy, every moment they had expected me to pay for something without question. She said she had tried to justify it. We wanted to build our own marriage rhythm, but when she had to read the list out loud, the words sounded hollow. She admitted she had taken my willingness for granted, and that sometimes she had deliberately ignored my feelings because she was afraid you'd make everything too complicated. She apologized, not promising quick change, not hiding behind easy phrases like, "We'll do better." She simply asked that I know she was facing things honestly, and if I was willing, they hoped to keep learning how to do that for the long run. I read it once, set the phone down, then opened it again, rereading line by line, holding each sentence up against the drawers of memory. Thanksgiving, the parent, teacher night, the birthday I learned of through a photo. There was no polish to her words, but neither was there any tug pulling me backward. I opened the reply box and typed, brief and clean, "I acknowledge your sincerity and respect that you both have chosen therapy. I'll keep the call schedule with Noah and Lily as agreed. As for the past, leave it be. We'll need time and repeated action, not words." I read it over, hit send. The screen returned to stillness, flat and quiet as a lake without wind. By dusk, I went back to reconstruction. The sketch of the wooden bridge had dried, ready for its next layer. I mixed a thin reddish brown and dragged it along the wood grain, leaving a few darker streaks where footsteps might have passed. I touched the brush with black pigment, adding small, uneven dots, rusted nails. The railing bent slightly. I let it stay that way, a small truth of things weathered by sun and time. Beneath the bridge, I deepened the stream's hue by half a tone and pulled a faint reflection downstream. When I stepped back, the painting breathed. It had a path, not the old one, but a new one, wide enough for one person. That night, the studio sent out a notice. Final exhibition entries were open. Each student could display 2 works. I registered reconstruction and a Red Hill landscape I'd painted the week before, added my name, date, and chose to hang them side by side. Afterward, I stood at the sink rinsing brushes. The red pigment ran loose in the water, the basin spreading like a map without borders. When I locked up, the Santa Fe air was cool and clean, like a fresh towel. Another message from Mark came in just one line. Ryan's side hasn't filed anything yet, still at consultation stage. "Keep living your day," he wrote. I put my phone away and looked up at the sky crystal clear, stars just emerging like tiny white paint dots from a test brush. My shoulders loosened, my steps slowed. I walked the brick path back to my room, passing windows glowing with yellow light, glimpsing half-dried canvases propped against walls. I thought about the meeting that might come someday, not chasing it, not avoiding it. If it comes, I'll sit down the same way I did before the waterfall this morning. Guide the path, don't force it. And if it never comes, I still have a bridge to walk across each night, smooth, steady, unbroken, inside my painting. At the corner, the wind swept by, carrying the scent of pine cold enough to remind me I was still awake. Back in my room, I set the folder on the shelf and turned off the light. In the quiet dark, I could hear the faintest tremor of water inside the glass as I set it on the table, a small, silent pulse of life, already moving in a new direction. The small gallery was filled with white frames, spotlights focused tight, the walls bright as fresh paper. People from the class moved around congratulating one another. Soft clinks of glasses, the hush of rubber soles gliding over the floor. I stood beside Reconstruction, the small card beneath it, bearing my name and the title. A pair of strangers stopped for a long moment, studying the reflection on the water, nodding before moving on. I clasped my hands behind my back and kept my breathing steady. When I turned to change position, I saw Ryan standing at the doorway. A light jacket, travel-worn hair, an expression trying hard to stay composed. He didn't speak, just walked straight to the painting. His eyes paused on the curved railing, moved down to the blurred bridge shadow in the water, then back to the wood grain dotted with rusted nails. I waited. "I read the message you sent Paige," he said quietly, still looking at the painting. "And I saw the photos Lily sent. The skies, I liked them. I came to talk. No arguing, no talk about the house." I nodded and gestured toward the back door. Outside was a small porch with 2 low wooden chairs facing an alley shaded by trees. The dry wind threaded through, and the yellow light from the gallery spilled across the steps like warm strokes of paint. We sat not directly facing each other, each turned slightly outward. Ryan folded his arms, then let them drop again, his back bent a little, as if waiting for judgment. "During therapy last week," he began, "the counselor asked me to write a list all the times I relied on you, the times I deliberately left you out of family decisions, the times I asked you to pay for things." It turned out longer than I thought. When I had to read it out loud, I was so ashamed I almost walked out. I said nothing. A dry leaf drifted past, rolling down the step. "I realized I was afraid of losing control of my marriage," he went on, "so I turned you into a service neat and convenient. I know that sounds awful. But back then, I thought it would make things smoother." "At the pier in Miami," I said, "you sent one short sentence. That sentence made everything clear. I don't want to go back to how things were. I need boundaries, not a rope that gets tied and untied again." He nodded, lips pressed tight. "I'm not asking you to undo anything," he said. "And I'm not asking for anything right now. I just want to start small, keep the video calls with Noah and Lily on whatever schedule works best for you. Maybe dinner once a month, if you agree. No pressure, no traps." I looked at his hands, small cuts around the knuckles. I remembered those same hands gripping my wrist when he was afraid of the dark. Now I saw them as the hands of a man sitting in a wooden chair that wobbled slightly beneath him. "Try," I said. "But words have to become habits. I won't change schedules at the last minute. I won't accept any more just this once requests. And if you or Paige find it hard, say so clearly. No vague messages." "I understand." He exhaled, shoulders lowering as if setting down a heavy load. "I'll send a firm schedule second Sunday of each month for dinner, if that's okay. We'll bring dessert, and for the calls, you give me the times. Wednesday evenings, 7 o'clock. Sundays, 4:30, I said, reciting them like 2 squares on a wall calendar. "I'll write that down." He smiled faintly, a small, honest relief. Then he hesitated, remembering something. "I want to apologize. Not for the house, though, that still stings, but for how I saw you, as if you didn't have a life of your own. I didn't grab the apology like a lifeline. I simply nodded. Forgiveness isn't a switch, I said, but if you walk the path, you'll see it. We sat in silence. The dry wind brushed through the trees, sounding like a pencil gliding over rough paper. Voices from the gallery drifted out and faded. On the porch, the small lamp flickered now and then, its yellow glow blinking like a slow eyelid. "Tell the kids I came," Ryan said softly. "They miss you. Lily said she wants you to paint her hand." "I'll call this weekend as planned," I answered. "Tell them Grandma sends her love." He stood first, glancing through the glass pane toward the gallery. His eyes paused on Reconstruction one more time. He lifted his hand as if to touch the glass, then let it fall. "That painting," he murmured. "It looks like the bridge I need to cross. I just don't know how long it'll take." "The bridge is there," I said. "It becomes your path the moment you step on it." He nodded. We shook hands, an ordinary handshake, free of the old knots and hesitations. He walked down the steps and into the alley, his shadow stretching long across the brick. I watched until he turned the corner. Back inside, the gallery lights still glowed evenly, the frames settled in their places. I stood again before Reconstruction. And suddenly, in my mind, I heard a soft hammer strike the final tap, driving a rusted nail a little deeper into wood. The painting was still the same, but inside me, the bridge felt sturdier. A woman from the class came up, asking how I mixed the reflection tones. I gave a few technical explanations, showing where to drag the dry brush for texture. When she left, I looked at the corner of the painting, at the small label with my name, Ellen Harper. The letters stood upright, not tucked into the edge. I exhaled long and light, like someone reaching the top of a hill and realizing she no longer needed the handrail. Outside, the wind swept in again, carrying the scent of pine and dry dust, a brief, wordless reminder. Keep going. I packed my things neatly, the way one folds a letter after finishing it. The Red Hill painting rolled inside a plastic tube, Reconstruction wrapped with a fabric strap, a few small sketches sandwiched between 2 sheets of cardboard. I shipped several pieces ahead, received the tracking number, checked out, locked the door twice, and lingered one more moment as the room absorbed the last scent of watercolor. The flight back to Texas felt like a pause exactly where it belonged, quiet, weightless. I closed my eyes, listening to the wind roaring against the fuselage, mentally sorting the days ahead, not rushing, just setting things in order. The new apartment was near a park, its large glass windows swallowing the noonday light. Light wood floors, white walls, a small but tidy kitchen. I unpacked the boxes, hung Reconstruction on the wall opposite the sofa, set the easel by the window, gave one drawer to fine-grained paper, another to masking tape, pencils, and blades. I taped my schedule on the wall with washi tape. 3 studio sessions a week, 1 long walk around the park, 1 afternoon at the community library. The box marked spare. I left blank in case I got tired. That empty space was part of the discipline. I sat down at the table and drafted an email to Ryan and Paige. The sentences were short, each in its own bullet point. Once a month, I'll take Noah and Lily out for a weekend to a museum, park, or lake planned in advance. Dinner on the 2nd Sunday of every month, alternating homes. One of those dinners will be at my apartment. I don't do last-minute babysitting, and I won't provide emergency financial help. If something important comes up, give notice so we can discuss it together. I reread it as if reviewing a contract, clicked send, and felt a quiet ease like setting a stone into its proper place. The first meeting under the new terms came quickly. The doorbell rang right on time. Ryan carried Lily. Paige held Noah's hand. I placed a pot of chicken soup on the table, added a salad and toasted bread. No one mentioned the past. Noah showed off his model spaceship, and Lily asked if I'd brought my brushes. I smiled and pointed to the jar of brushes by the window. After dinner, I spread paper across the table, filled the water tray, and led the kids through the exercise Tree Shadows from Watercolor Blooms. I let the water spread into a long, uneven stain and said, "Now, turn it into shadow." Noah leaned in, angled his brush, and shaped the bloom into the shadow of a tree reaching toward a trail. Lily added tiny dots of people walking beneath it. I wrote the date in the corner and clipped the sheets together into a thin stack. They dried quickly in the sunlight streaming in. Ryan and Paige washed the dishes. Paige dried her hands and sat at the edge of the chair. "We moved into a smaller rental," she said. "It feels easier to breathe. We're covering our own expenses now, and we've divided the chores." Ryan added. We're still in therapy. It's not always easy, but we're doing it. No offers, no half-promises hung between the sentences. I saw their hands on their own lives, the best sign there could be. In the weeks that followed, life found its rhythm. In the mornings, I crossed Zilker Park, watching joggers, breathing in the scent of wet grass after sprinklers. At the studio, 3 times a week, I painted simple, everyday things. An empty wooden chair, a child's shadow stretching across a chalk line, a row of dim streetlights before the rain. I learned how to mix gray from the 3 primary colors so shadows wouldn't look dead. In the evenings, I went to the community library, sat by the long window tables, and read slowly through a chapter on cold-press paper techniques. Each turned page felt like laying another plank across my own bridge. The next weekend, it was my turn to take the kids to the lake. I brought a small camera, snapping photos of their hands holding brushes before they splattered water on the paper. I'm going to paint this moment, I said. Lily tilted her head. Make my hand bigger, Grandma. All right, I laughed. Ryan and Paige sat on the stone bench, not interrupting the lesson. They spoke quietly, looked tired but not tense. The wind rippled across the lake's surface, the water wrinkled softly, like my forehead when I try to recall a color I once mixed. One evening, sunset stretched across the city. Ryan and I stood on the balcony, watching the sun sink behind the rooftops. From here, we could see a hollow patch of green where the park lay, and the sound of a dog barking drifted up. Ryan kept his hands in his pockets, eyes on the horizon. I'm grateful, he said, for that shock. Without it, we'd still be stuck in the same mess. I turned to him and simply said, we're rebuilding. Slowly, but steadily. He nodded, as if setting down something heavy he'd been carrying for years. Later that night, after they'd gone, the apartment felt light as though someone had opened the door to let the wind pass through. I closed it, turned on the small kitchen lamp, and pulled down the habit chart taped to the wall. I crossed off the boxes. Studio Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Long walk Saturday. Library Thursday. Video call with the kids Wednesday evening, dinner second Sunday. Next to it, I added a line in fine marker. Keep the rhythm, don't rush. I sat for a while in front of reconstruction. The desk lamp lit it evenly, the wood grain sharp, the bridge shadow still beneath the water. I noticed one section of railing slightly too pale. I picked up a small brush, mixed a thin brown wash, and drew one short stroke. Enough. The rusted nail in the painting neither protruded nor sank. It stayed exactly where it should. I turned off the light, pulled the curtain almost closed, leaving a narrow gap for the night breeze. In the dark, the city hummed like a soft, steady engine. Nothing hurried. I could even hear the faint rub of the wall calendar against the paint, a thin, even sound, like a tiny pendulum confirming that I was living at the pace I had chosen. The apartment glowed with late afternoon light. I placed a few white chrysanthemums in a glass vase and set a small cake in the middle of the table. Noah and Lily clutched 2 handmade cards, one with a blue balloon, the other with 2 tiny hands covered in colorful dots. Ryan and Paige arrived 10 minutes early. No one mentioned the past. Their coats hung neatly by the door, the scent of the park's wind following them inside and fading away. Paige handed me a thick envelope. Ryan nodded, as if to say, go ahead, open it. Inside were 2 tickets printed with rolling green hills and a confirmation letter for a watercolor workshop. At the bottom was a card that read, wishing you well on your journey. We respect your new boundaries. Paige's handwriting was straight and even. Ryan's signature tilted slightly at the end. I ran my hand over the paper, said little, just nodded. Then I turned to Noah and Lily. Before Grandma leaves next weekend, how about we paint a series of pictures of the trees in the park? They high-fived each other, both shouting, yes, eyes bright, as if they'd just been given more playtime. We lit the candle. The small flame trembled, reflecting off the white frosting. Lily looked up at me and asked, bluntly, Grandma, did you let go of the old stuff? Ryan and Paige froze for a moment, but I didn't let the silence linger. The old stuff is still there, I said, but it doesn't have the steering wheel anymore. Every day, I turn a little farther toward the brighter road. Lily nodded the way children understand things, through images rather than words. I pulled my small easel onto the table and clipped a fresh sheet of paper. Watch this. I wet the brush and drew one long, uneven streak, letting it bleed across the page. This, I said, is trouble. Noah giggled. I tilted the brush, deepened the edges, added a few thin branches reaching out, then darkened the base. The shadow of a tree spread across a path. Their eyes widened. Paige stood beside Ryan, silent, watching. Ryan cleared his throat, speaking slowly. We're continuing therapy, and we'd like to keep the Sunday dinners, as planned. I've already set reminders for your video calls with the kids. I nodded. Good. What matters is consistency, not promises. There was no handshake, no ceremony, just the soft sound of spoons against plates and the warm scent of cake. After dinner, I spread my travel plans across the table: flight dates, the address of the Hilltop studio, class hours. I marked the time slots when I could video call the kids and noted the date we'd meet again after I returned. Paige suggested, "Before you go, let's take a walk in the park, just the two of us. No big talk, just walk." "All right," I said. Thursday morning. We all helped clean up. I opened the window, letting the night air sweep away the faint smell of blown-out candles. I lifted reconstruction from the wall, wiped off a thin layer of dust, and rehung it straight. The bridge's reflection was now half a shade darker than before I knew I had deepened it somewhere along a quiet afternoon. I lit a small candle on my desk, its smoke curling like a thread. Opening my notebook, I wrote, held the boundaries, found the path. The ink sank into the page, still and sure, without bleeding. Noah ran up, holding out his new drawing, the shadow of an oak tree, with two tiny people holding hands beneath it. "Sign it, Grandma." Lily handed me hers too. Her watercolor stain had turned into a row of trees along a path, with a little dog tugging a leash. I signed both in the corner, added the date. Ryan and Paige exchanged a calm glance, no hidden edge behind their words anymore, just the steady work of doing what they'd said they would. Before they left, we stood at the door for a moment. Ryan said, "Have a good trip, Mom." Paige added, "Send us pictures of the sky when you can." I nodded. The kids wrapped their arms around my waist, their hair warm and sun-scented. The apartment settled back into quiet. I turned off the main light, letting the candle burn on. I sat, watching the small flame lower itself slowly. In that silence, I could hear the clock ticking, like someone gently tapping a fingernail on the edge of a table, steady and sure. On the easel, a clean sheet of paper waited, already clipped in place. Tomorrow, I'd lay down the first color for the next painting, maybe a morning road in the hills, thin mist, long shadows of trees. I didn't need to know exactly how it would look. I only knew my hand had learned when to press the brush down and when to lift it away. The candle burned down, leaving a small, round pool of wax, neat, contained, not spilled. I blew gently. Smoke drew a fine gray line into the air and disappeared. At the edge of the table, the calendar page with my flight date caught the lamp's light. The bold number didn't scare me. I stood, half drew the curtain. Outside, the city sank into twilight, like a watercolor wash, mixed to just the right ratio, not blurred, not harsh, only deepening. I ran my fingers along the edge of the easel and felt a calm as smooth as still water. The road ahead had opened dimly bright, free of obstacles. I turned off the light, leaving a trace of good darkness for the paper to rest before it received its next wash of color.